Yeah, this is gonna be a shorter YouTube video. Hope the camera angle is a little bit better this time. I really hope the camera angle is just a a little bit better. So this one is gonna be about how basically semen retention, right, is kind of overrated. So I'm just gonna use some of the notes that I have here. Okay, so when we look at semen retention from a philosophical or philosophical or psychological perspective, what we would actually start to see is here's its inherent premise. So basically, whatever energy, quote unquote, was within the seed actually is recirculated through the system, and you get these quote unquote benefits from, well, not engaging in the act or fixing it or some sort of issue initially there. So what could actually be the initial cause was either at a young age being inherently very promiscuous or engaging in a lot of pornography, basically. So this whole no-fap or semen retention kind of movement, right, and actually arose from that sort of issue that the participants were seeing. So imagine being 14, 15, and having an addiction basically that you can't really control yourself from, and that sort of addiction kind of controls your whole aspect as well as interaction. Or maybe you were just getting a lot of like lays when you were when you were like you were a young Don when you were younger, and you were just like fucking around with a bunch of girls all the fucking time, and you were basically like ejaculating with that. But like those are for different types of guys. But basically, let's say in either of those scenarios that happened, right? So the addiction starts to happen, and obviously, with any sort of addiction, there's like a lot of drawbacks. So, in an attempt to actually find a solution, or we go and find like semen retention. It's like there's these sort of quote unquote benefits. You get better, you get more productive, everything changes, your life just turns like a whole 360, or quote unquote, with their those are the anecdotes. So we can already see from this young age that there's like some sort of inertia that actually causes the physical body to actually start to become weak with any sort of addiction, and this kind of sexual inertia starts to come, and anything that is in perpetual motion usually keeps this motion. So with its premise, if we use philosophy and formal logic, it has an A, which is I spill my seed too much, and then you go to B, if I don't spill, then I won't have these effects, with C, which is not spilling seed is good. Which, if we use formal logic and philosophy, has a lot of issues. It's not inherently deductively valid, because like the best and the brightest of humanity would be guys who never got laid, which is a funny idea to think. So like the most physically dominant, the most physically attractive, the most intelligent, the most artistic, the most creative, apparently never got laid. So if they never had it would never, like, they would just be the best of the best. They would like dominate in every single arena all the fucking time. And if we actually break that down through philosophy and through its premise, we'd actually realize that that's usually not the case. Obviously, they obviously saw something, or they got laid with someone. So like, obviously, it's invalid. It's invalid. So there's a lot of holes within the premise, right? There's a lot of holes within the premise. And what you find through this whole movement actually goes back into Chinese philosophical texts, which I've been reading, and I've actually figured out that a lot of this semen retention stuff is, how do I say, incomplete. Not only is the philosophical premise of it not fully there, but it's also like really incomplete and not fully healthy, if I had to say. It's not fully healthy, as in because it doesn't take into account the full nature of a human being. So there's a lot of anecdotes that says that, hey, maybe this will be better, or like, or you'll get this and this and yeah. Oh man, the best thing I can give an example is like that video of Mordecai, and he sprays he sprays that. If I can show it, I'll probably put it here.
Ah! Are you done with your stupid cologne yet? You know that stuff's not gonna work.
Why don't you get out of here? You don't know anything.
Mordecai Rigby, wonderful day we're having. Oh! In your face! I knew that stuff wasn't gonna work.
Shut up! I'm not trying to track Pops. I'm trying to track Margaret. She's probably on her way right now.
But that's basically what like like anyone who tries to see semen retention thinks is gonna magically happen. But it's a grain of truth. I'm not saying that it will never happen. There is a grain of truth to it, right? So after reading all these philosophical texts within Chinese philosophy, which is called within Kung Fu, you start to realize that there's a lot of missing pieces within it, such as this sort of text that actually say that abstinence is as dangerous as indulgence, and quite honestly does not lead or does not help with the leakage, which was the initial cause of the addiction, of the whatever over sexual nature. So abstinence on one hand is as bad as overindulgence, and these two things actually there's always always a side. There's always some guys who are like there, some guys, or maybe a girl, I don't I have no fucking clue. So there's like always these two sides. So there's always like this one side that's like this, or this one side is like no, 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 and someone's like yes all the time, always has to be, and you're always trying to get to the middle of it. And that's what I noticed throughout these texts. And even in science, if we take it to a little bit of science, after a long ass period of time of actually doing this whole semen retention, what these like no fibers don't never really talk about, aside from the whole philosophy, is that on a physiological level you start to get like things called nocturnal emissions. So they're like, no, it's not bad, it's not great, but like nocturnal emissions are basically your body's way of eliminating. Now, I'm not saying that for the overindulgence kind of guys that this is an excuse to actually like keep doing it. I'm just saying for the abstinence kind of guys, think outside of the box. Why would your body actually need to do nocturnal emissions, and how would we need to overcome it? Because it can be as distracting, as harmful as these sort of, well, overindulgence. And we can actually see this within psychology, or within, also if we go back to philosophy, we would also see this within mythology. Didn't mean to rhyme, but okay. We would also see this within mythology, where we would always find the quote-unquote hero having to overcome these female energies, or these female participants who want to actually drain your energy. These could be in the form of vampires or whatever. The thing about mythology is that it's always explaining something that's not evidently apparent or literal, but it has a meaning symbolically. So let's take an example with, in medieval culture, you would find things like succubi or whatever. You could take it literally, you could take it symbolically, but there is an unconscious process that usually happens when you start to quote unquote abstain. And the initial discipline of quote unquote abstaining isn't really the issue here. It's the extended period of not really gaining any sort of particular mastery, if that makes sense. And without an inherent level of mastery, it starts to make you basically weaker to any sort of female energies itself. So what happens, or what the representation of nocturnal emissions are, if we take it physiologically as well as we apply to some sort of philosophical perspective, we would actually realize that what this is, if you abstain for a long ass period of time, is that you're going to see your basically within these Chinese or philosophical texts, they call it atrophying. So what would you actually experience is that the very thing which you're trying to cultivate would begin to atrophy because these nocturnal emissions are happening, and because they're happening so often, you'd actually start to have the energy. It'd be like the overindulgence kind of guys have it like drained. But if you do like abstinence for a really really long, like 1 year plus, you're gonna see like the energy atrophy because it's going to all these nocturnal emissions, and you're gonna be much weaker than the guys who like overindulge. You're gonna be much weaker to it because you don't know how to interact with that kind of energy, if that makes sense. You don't know how to interact in a way that doesn't really influence or harm you or that sort of thing. And if you don't know how to interact in such a way that cannot harm you, then it's going to harm you anyway. Because now, if we take it back to philosophy, philosophers usually interact and call this the mechanisms of nature. And nature wants to enslave you, basically. Nature really wants to enslave you. Like it's a natural circular process. There's no any area for transcendence or the ability to overcome. And because if you're following this whole dichotomy of abstinence to overindulgence, you're within the whole framework of nature and you never really find a way to overcome it. And because you never really find a way to overcome it, you're always going to be enslaved by nature. And if this quote that I'm going to just say from the Art of Bedchamber, you can check it out if you want like to read up on these texts. The logic of traditional energetics seems to suggest, at least the sexual school, that energy lost through sexual activity could be replaced most efficiently only by sexual energy itself. So it's like a renewable resource that needs to interact with each other. It's a renewable resource that needs to like interact and commingle in order for it to grow. Because if you overdo it, you're gonna become weaker. If you abstain from it, you may get like a little bit of results initially, and then there's a point where you have to interact again. There's a point where you're gonna have to interact, and you either have to like do what you gotta do or get laid or something, man. Something. Something's gotta happen. But like there's a point where like the avoidance needs to actually, so that you actually grow, and those inherent that inherent nature never really atrophies. Because I might talk about this in another video, or I might have talked about it before. You can check it out on my channel. But like I talked about how this kind of thing always like, because the inherent nature of the modern world is to actually make you a little bit weaker through diet or anything else. I might expand on it if anyone's interested. So that's the whole thing. This is why I like the whole